All right, just get things set up here, folks. We'll be going here in a second. All right, perfect. As I attempt to get things going. Hey, everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, live to talk about MSU's victory lap over the Big Ten field as they tear apart the Wolverines 79-62 on senior day. But before we begin, I need to play something real quick for you, and we'll see how quickly I can get up on my phone here, which always, it's never as quick as I think it's going to be. All right, we'll try this and see how this works.
Very happy to welcome Eric to the podcast, who's going to be my partner in this venture from this point forward. And we're going to kick things off by starting about the NCAA tournament, talking about the NCAA tournament. Eric, you want to lead into that? We'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because my teenage son, when I told him I was going to be your co-host, he said, "Hey, Rod went into the transfer portal and got some." So
yeah, very, very accurate.
So I don't know if I came from a mid-major. I'm not exactly sure which conference we came from, but we're going to launch right into this because I think I'm very excited, obviously, to start. Hello to all the fans of the show, and I hope to carry on the tradition that Sam and Cam had started. So we're going to keep the quality up, and we're going to just have a lot of fun talking about Michigan State basketball.
All right, so that was 3 years ago, pretty much to the day. Over 350 some episodes. I've actually kind of lost count. And at least, and I did not add it up, it's between 500,000 and 750,000 downloads since that time, and tens of thousands of loads on YouTube. So pretty cool that we've been at it this long. It's been a fun ride for me, and it's kind of, since like senior day, this kind of felt like an appropriate sort of time to start to bring that up. And so anyway, it's been great, good friend, and having a lot of fun doing the show and meeting all you guys out in the outside. So anyway, it's been great, and so I really appreciate that everybody else who's been a part of this.
Obviously, it's been a great addition, and it's one of those portal editions that everything clicked.
Sometimes they work out, right? You just never know.
Sometimes they work out. You never know.
Yeah,
I've been really fortunate, and as you mentioned, whenever that was it 3 years ago?
It's March 16th, 2022. Yeah, 15th. Yeah,
3 years ago. I've been very fortunate. I think I've repeated this a couple of times at least in recent years, but the original idea for this thing was actually Sam's.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of credit for whatever this has become goes to him for having the idea in the first place and reaching out to me to see if I would be interested in doing this with him. And I'm very glad that I took him up on that offer. It's been a great ride, and of course Cam came in and really helped save it at a point where Sam just had a lot of pressures with his academic life coming to bear on him, and he just could not do it anymore. And Cam stepped in and steadied the ship and helped me continue to do it. When we started out, I had I thought it was certainly worth a try, and I thought it would be interesting to do, but it would have been a void if I had not been able to keep it going. So all credit to him, really, since he handled all the technical stuff, and also got us on a path where we actually started to be able to make this a little bit of a financial endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Which has enabled you and I, and we've continued on from there. And you've been a huge help in that regard, in terms of putting us in a position where we could do things like go out to the West Coast as we did this year. It was unfortunate. We witnessed two of the only three losses they took in the league, but nevertheless, it was a fantastic experience that I won't soon forget. And just if for no other reason than just seeing what the Michigan State fan base truly is about.
Yeah.
And you saw it. We both were not, and I think we both had high expectations, but it surpassed anything we thought we'd see. So anyway, that has obviously been a development, and then from the point with you coming in 3 years ago, I really do feel like the quality of what we're doing in many, many ways has just continued to elevate. So thanks to all of my partners, you especially, you're the one that's here right now. But everybody involved deserves credit for this being whatever it is, and hopefully it's something that everybody listening to this enjoys.
Yeah. Well, and we got you a good mic. So now we're all set. It
Now
only
we're
took us
see
300
constant improvement, right?
always tweaking and improving, right? You think we're just kind of old stodgy and never change like Izzo, but turns out actually always evolving. It doesn't it's just behind the scenes. So also a quick shout out to Adam and his super cute daughter, Gracie, who was there. Hi, Gracie. Also John, Nadia, and Zach, who just came up and said hi to me at the game. Appreciate it, guys. So great win for Michigan State today. Obviously came out of the gates playing like a rivalry game. Michigan, not quite so much. They didn't seem to kind of have any idea what was going to hit them, and they got hit good and hard. Spartans completely dismantled University of Michigan in the first half, heading into the locker room with a 50-28 lead. Just about the only player who could do anything for Michigan was Vlad Golden, who was really good. In the end, it's just a sloppy second half from MSU, kind of let Michigan get in it down to low double digits, but the game never really felt in doubt. Aside from Golden, Wilf actually went to work a little bit in the second half and got some stuff done. But no one else from Michigan was able to do anything. I don't think anyone had more than a field goal except Burnett, who had 2 field goals. So,
that's right.
Of course, what might be the most memorable part about the game is the way it ended. Long-standing tradition, of course, in Michigan State. Seniors checking out of the game. They go with the kiss logo at the center court. A couple of Wolverines, and these are all reserves at this point. All the stars were sitting on the bench. Refused to move off center court. I can't remember who it was. I'm sure you'll be able to tell me. But so at this point, everyone. So Tre Holloman took issue with this. I think Fiddler was way off to the side when he sort of kissed the logo, or maybe Sapala too. And Tre was going to have none of that. And so he went and talked to the guys to tell them to move off or something. And then shoving match ensued. And Jaden was able to check out. And then a couple, offsetting technical fouls or whatever were assessed. But I guess an appropriate ending to a season for the Spartans and Michigan.
Yeah, so let's talk about the end, all the antics first, and then we'll return to the game, because this was a great day from a basketball perspective for Michigan State. There's a lot that's come out, and given that you're just back, I don't know how much you've seen.
Very little.
What happened was this: 2 freshman guards, LJ Cason, who is from Florida, and Phat Brooks, who's from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and was recruited by Michigan State.
Oh.
I say that because I think that's somewhat salient information to have.
He knows what's going on. Yes.
There you go. Stood at half court. Now, I will note, and I can't verify the accuracy of this 100% for the whole game, but if the claim by Michigan is, well, that's what our guys do on an attempted free throw, they stand at half court. I've seen an overlay of a free throw taken 2 minutes before that, the one where the incident happened. They were not standing at half court. They were standing at where the old timeline would be. So a little bit above the top of the key. So that's one excuse dispensed with. Okay. I will also note, for the record, 31 years this has been a tradition at Michigan State. 31. More than 3 decades. Never been an incident until today.
Yep.
Weird that it's the school that always seems to be involved in this stuff. Always. You had an incident with Ohio State on the football field this year. You've had the incidents with Juwan Howard throwing a punch at a Wisconsin assistant coach in the handshake line. You've had the various antics of Hunter Dickinson in that program. You had the Devin Bush, which this most closely resembled, quite frankly. Chris Solari from the Free Press noted that, and he's absolutely correct. That's the best comparison for this little routine. You can go all the way back to, as Tom Izzo alluded to, I believe, in the post game celebration. Uh, you can go all the way back to when the Fab Five came into a then fairly new Breslin Center and uh, did something at half court that those who witnessed it will never forget. I go back to an old Mark D'Antonio line that I've really liked ever since he said it. And this was said about if you remember the game where they came out before the game, they put a stake in the field at Spartan Stadium.
Right.
And then they got it, as Mark D'Antonio put it, they got it shoved on the field. As he said, it doesn't come from the coach because the coaches change. Yet this stuff keeps happening. It reminds me of the meme from the Netflix series, I Think You Should Leave, where Tim Robinson, who's a Detroit native, I don't know where his allegiances go in this thing, but regardless, you've probably all or most of you have seen this meme on X or Blue Sky or what have you. The sketch is that there's a guy driving an Oscar Mayer Wiener hot dog car, a car shaped like a hot dog, and it crashes into like the front of a building. And so there's a bunch of people standing around, and a guy in a hot dog suit is saying, "We all want to find out who did this." That's what it comes to mind when I think about Michigan. It's like, yeah, apparently the world just has a problem with the University of Michigan athletic teams. It comes from the program. It's not about the coach. Dusty May's in his first year. Now, I'll get into what he had to say after the game. He's stepping up to his role as King Dipshit, but he's still fresh to this thing. And yet it just keeps happening. Why is that? Why could we all want to find the guys who did this? It's just remarkable. So anyway, that just to set the stage for this thing. So they're standing there at half court, and Frankie Fiddler has his hugs. He's moving to center court to kiss the Spartan. They don't move. Frankie, it's, I guess, credit to him that he didn't want to make an issue out of it or didn't think that one needed to be made. He kind of went off to the side a little bit. This thing happens at center court. Again, 31 years. Big Ten Network made a documentary about it. That's how enshrined and embedded this thing is in what MSU does, okay? So when you want to toss out of them, we had no idea what they were doing. Get lost. It's sorry, not having it. So anyway, Frankie Fiddler does that after the first free throw. The second free throw, before the second free throw shot, Simone Zapala is gonna exit the game. So he does his hugs. He's moving to center court. Just as I guess he was just starting to move. And Tre Holloman, after the game, I saw an interview with him, said he heard the Michigan kids talking. They weren't going to move. This was intentional. Don't let anybody con you, anything else. They were trying to, as Tom Izzo alluded to in the celebration, nobody is going to make us change our tradition. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to screw with it.
Yeah.
Tre Holloman was not going to let that happen, as I heard him say in an interview after the game. Either they were going to move or he was going to make them move. And that's exactly what he did. He stepped up, gave LJ Cason a shove. Phat Brooks decided to shove him back. Tre and Brooks each were assessed a technical, which didn't matter.
Yeah, Brooks got in the record book.
Yeah, he got right. He got in the box score.
Stats.
Nice job, Phat. And that was it. And then they moved. Zapala had his celebratory moment. Then Jaden Akins. The shame, if there's any one shame out of this, other than the shame on Michigan's program, it's that Zapala's moment kind of got screwed with a little bit.
Yeah.
But he still got to do it, But yeah, that's the unfortunate part out of all of it. But so I had said after witnessing the end of the game, because Dusty May and Izzo talked uh, as that incident was being sorted out, they
Right,
talked
exactly.
the handshake line. Seemed like everything was okay. And my assumption was Dusty May was offering some kind of apology. Like, look, they didn't know they're freshmen, or we didn't mean for that to happen, something like that, because Izzo seemed very conciliatory, right? Then I watched Dusty May's post game. And he's asked about it, of course, right off the top.
Sure.
And he goes into this obtuse deal about, well, is it legal for them to stand at half court when free throws are? Is there a tradition that they can't stand at half court when a free throw is being shot? This is his response. Then he says, they earned the right. They earned the right to rub our noses in it. You want to talk about narcissism on full display? Here's a hint, Dusty. It's not about you. It's been going on for 31 goddamn years. It's not about you. Your team got humiliated by what happened in those 40 minutes of play. MSU didn't need to do anything else, and they certainly weren't kissing the Spartan at center court to further humiliate your already shattered team. So Dusty May is on the list now. He got himself there. Michigan's got a problem. You mentioned at the start, and we'll get back to the game, of course, because that's what really matters most in this. They came out to start that game, and they were scared.
They weren't ready for it. No.
They were not remotely ready. And I said this before the first game. You always, when we haven't had a new guy in this thing in forever and ever, almost my entire lifetime. You got to go back to Judd starting out to have a Michigan State head coach who's in his first year and has not been part of this, because Izzo had been part of it for more than a decade as an assistant.
Exactly.
So I've watched these Michigan guys come in, and none of them win the first go around against Izzo. They just don't. But part of the problem is frequently, the only one who I think kind of understood it was Juwan Howard, because he played in it.
Sure.
The rest of them don't. It was obvious to me from watching the pregame for the game in Ann Arbor, the things that were being said, that they didn't understand. And that's what we saw in Ann Arbor. Well, once again, they did not understand. So the most charitable interpretation that you can offer Dusty May after all of this is that he doesn't understand what he's in the middle of. If I were a Michigan fan, that's a problem. That's a big problem. If you don't understand where you are, you don't understand what you're in the middle of and what you've got to deal with, you got to sort that out before we start talking about anything basketball related. And if you think that it's not related to that's not a major factor in all this, you're out of your mind, because they got punked. They got punked in that first half. They were rattled. They were scared. They had no idea what hit them, and they were down 22 at halftime because of it.
Yeah.
Now, yes, Michigan State played very well in a basketball sense. Michigan did not. That's all true as well. But basketball, like most other sports, is a game where emotion matters. Toughness matters. Understanding the moment, being able to play with the requisite emotion and toughness and physicality while also containing it enough to be able to play sharp basketball, all of that matters. And Michigan failed the test miserably. So they got a problem. And I'm not talking about what happens to them, the rest of this year. They probably, odds are, will not see Michigan State again this year. It's possible, but I'm betting against it. Because I don't think they're going anywhere. They're not going anywhere in the Big Ten tournament, and to see them in the NCAA tournament is very unlikely. But for next year, man, you got to get better players, Dusty, but you also got to get your handle on this to have any shot. It took John Beilein a few years And he finally got to a point that he kind of had a grasp. He never wanted to embrace it the way I think you really have to embrace it, but it was good enough that he was able to make it competitive in the back half of his tenure at Michigan. Dusty May's got a long way to go. Maybe a little less time on the veneers and a little more time understanding what you're in the middle of now. Because this isn't FAU against the American Conference All-Stars anymore, guy. This is for real. For real. And if you don't understand that, if you don't understand what motivates Tre Holloman to do what he did, you are lost. You got no chance. You got no chance for your basketball game to have any impact on what's going to happen, because mentally you're already out of it. And so that's where it's at. I was really happy, by the way, to see when, and you were there for it, right?
Yeah.
To see when Izzo brought Tre up to kiss center court for doing what he did. That was fantastic. Very inspired. And then who was standing right there to shake his hand? Mark D'Antonio.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, and I don't want to go too far. I had this thought before we started recording. I wanted to say it. We're hopefully years away from having to worry about what's next and who's next at Michigan State. But I am absolutely convinced. I have seen what it takes to own this rivalry in the two major sports. I only speak to football and basketball. And I hope Jonathan Smith is figuring it out, because he needs to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You have to approach this in a certain way. You cannot just another game this thing and have the kind of performance that Michigan State expects. Its fans, former players, all of it. You have to approach this thing in a certain way. And when you don't, you get in trouble if you're Michigan State. So, you know, if it's going to be somebody, if it ends up being somebody that is not part of the immediate family, that person's going to have, because I don't want to be sitting here talking about the Michigan State equivalent to Dusty May stumbling through his first two go-arounds in this thing, in part because he doesn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the game a little bit then, especially that first half, just to shift gears. So I thought the real change was Jeremy Fears. This looked like the Jeremy Fears that we saw at the beginning of the season. I mean, he was fired up for this game, obviously.
From the opening tap.
Oh, yeah.
Got into Trey Donaldson's face and let him know what kind of day it was going to be. Beautiful.
Yeah, Michigan State's backcourt really just tore Michigan apart. Their guards were unable to do anything. Really, I think they were like 2 for 11 or something from the field, or 2 for 14. Not many. They didn't get much done at all. As I mentioned, Burnett only had 2 field goals, and he's the only other person besides Wolf and Golden who had more than one field goal make of the game. So they dictated the play, and this game was over 8-9 minutes into the game, maybe. And I think at that point it was just, the question was just what the final score was going to be, and that pretty much was it. And they had a huge lead, and I think Richardson maybe had a bucket. I mean, he hardly had scored.
He was not part of the initial onslaught.
No, yeah. And then I had just turned to my wife and like, yeah, boy, they've done all this without Tre scoring, and then, or not with Tre, without Jace, and then like truly 5 seconds later, he hits that 3 in the corner. But anyway, it was great. It's great to see Jaden hit 3 threes in that first half, really kind of get going, and on his senior day, because I know he was super emotional for this afterwards. He's probably one of the most emotional guys I've seen in a senior day for some time. I mean, I
agree, and it's kind of surprising on one level, because not that Jaden doesn't play with emotion, he does, but he's not one of those guys that you'd put like, look, everybody knew how Mateen Cleaves was going to react in that kind of moment, right? I mean, that script had been written for years. And there have been some other guys like that where you knew you were not tum-tum. You were not surprised with the emotion of it. But Jaden really isn't. He's a guy that gets fired up when he's playing, but I don't think of him as a super, super emotional guy in that way. But you could see it on television. like he was kind of overwhelmed by the moment. So you saw, I didn't get to see obviously the full senior day celebration. So you saw more than I did, but you could tell even when he was being, when he went to kiss the Spartan head and when he was being taken out of the game, you could see that it really meant something to him. And it's been well disseminated on Twitter, especially this week. Well, there's that shot of Jaden when he's in middle school.
Yeah.
Only up that his goal was to play college basketball for Michigan State. So it was a long-standing dream he had. It was not always, a straight upward curve, a hockey stick, as they say in the investment world. But 4 years, and he gets the reward of being a starter, a captain, and a key figure on an outright Big Ten, a Big Ten champion that lapped the field, won the league by 3 games outright. That's a heck of a season and a heck of a career. And he was all those guys, but when we're talking about the guards, you can talk about what they did offensively, and that was impressive. Jace with 18, Tre with 20 to lead the way. Jaden had 11, Jeremy had 7. So they all contributed offensively. But I thought that this game was put away. For as good as Michigan State was on offense, they were way better on defense in that first half. They were insane. How connected they were, just gap help and recovery, getting over the top of ball screens, not letting the Area 51 nonsense do damage when they try to run that too big pick and roll stuff. That was a clinic defensively. And the guards had a lot to do with that. And that's really where the game was put away in the first half of the way Michigan State defended, particularly with the guards.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the turnover edge I think was 2-9 or something at halftime, they hadn't had that one turnover for the last possession, which Burnett got that layup. I mean, it was a super clean first half, which is the reason that was just such a blowout in the first half.
They were really, they no turnovers essentially. They shot the 3 very well. Ball movement was incredibly good, but I still maintain a lot of that was triggered by the way MSU was defending. A lot of those Michigan turnovers in the first half were live ball turnovers. It allowed Michigan State to get out and transition, and they were just punishing Michigan there.
Yeah, so one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country, Michigan State, shoots 38% from 3 in this game. Michigan, one of the best, or they were.
Well,
I guess
not for a long time.
It's been a while, yes. But they only shot 13%, so that's going to help Michigan State's three-point defense percentage, I think.
Climbing from number 4 in the nation. Yeah, let me actually, go ahead. I'm going to
let's check out Ken Palm and see how they're doing.
Yeah.
The other thing that, and I don't remember that being a key of the game. I don't think it is. Yeah, so I think one thing to point out, the free throws have been a real problem the last 5 during this win streak. Really trouble at the line. This time, Michigan State shoots 83% from the free throw line, 20 for 24. Michigan gets 29 free throws, and I have to check, but I think most of those were Vlad Golden. I mean, he had a majority of them, and I guess Wolf had 11, and Vlad had pretty much the rest. He must have had 18, and he was really good from the line. So, just overall, really good performance from Michigan State, obviously, the first half. And the second half I was hoping it'd be more. It was a lot of fun, that first half, but to maintain that intensity, and I guess I'll give Michigan a little bit of credit that they didn't give up. They didn't, roll over, and they fought back in that second half, which was, something, but it was obviously they didn't have enough. And the thing is, if they weren't going to hit the 3, they're not going to get back in that game. I mean, they're not going to get back with Golden just hitting 2s, and so that's why even in that first half, although he was hitting a lot of 2s, it was like the only thing they had going. I mean, he was really their only offense. I think he still finished almost half their points, right? Pretty close. He had 29.
29 of 62, right? Yeah. Almost half.
Besides
one bucket short. Yeah. By the way, Michigan State is up to number 3 in 3-point defense.
At some point, just you can't really go any further.
Right? It's pretty much hitting the ceiling.
Yeah.
The thing with Golden, I mean, I'm not going to take anything away from him. He played well, and certainly you've still got to finish those plays. But this was a prime example of, I mean, some might feel this is undervaluing what he did a little bit, but that's about the most hollow 29-point game you're ever going to see. because Michigan State just, I think in the second half, there were a handful of occasions later on where they started to bring a guard to try to double him. But that was it. I mean, they played him straight up and they basically said, okay,
Yeah.
if you're going to go now, Izzo mentioned that he wanted more out of his bigs defensively, and I'll buy that. But Golden's a good finisher. You know,
Yeah.
he's a
When he gets
guy
it deep, he's tough.
yeah, if you give him one-on-one defensive coverage and he's able to get anywhere remotely near the rim, he's a good finisher. It's not what most big men are going to do. Your normal kind of defense in the post is probably not going to get it done because he's a very effective finisher. So he had a nice day, didn't even remotely matter. And yeah, that was the name of that tune.
Yeah. Yeah. The 14 for those, he was good from the line, 11 for 14. So he was really,
That's true. And he's
much better than
normally
usual there.
he's a 71% shooter on the year, so that's maybe a tick better than you would expect.
Yeah.
him.
9 for 12 from the field, though. I mean, from the,
I thought the other guy, I mean, Wolf ends up having a decent looking stat line, 18 points, 13 boards.
well, let's just get into that, huh?
Yeah.
So,
But the first half, almost all that production was the second half when the game was essentially decided. And even considering, look at the totality of it, 5 for 15 from the floor. He had 4 assists to 3 turnovers. Now the first game, he played pretty cleanly, 8 assists, 2 turnovers. But Michigan State, I thought, guarded him exceptionally well in this game. And part of the decision to not double on Golden is related to that. It's you don't want to give, if they manage out of that kind of situation to get the ball to Wolf, he can do damage when you're kind of scrambling, you're trying to recover, you're in odd man situations. By playing them straight up, they really limited what Wolf was going to be able to create. So that if Golden's 29 was a little bit hollow, Wolf's 18 was, I mean, you had infinity space rolling around in there in terms of hollowness.
yeah,
It
well,
was brutal.
well, he was the player to keep in the gutter for Michigan State, brought to you by the Brothers Just Do Gutters. And just as a reminder to everybody, you get 10% off your gutter work if the brothers do it for you. So just get their estimate at our support page at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. It is, of course, spring. It's going to be 75 degrees when I'm down in Indianapolis in a couple days. So I'm very excited about that. So it is spring. The water's coming. So make sure you have your gutters functioning properly. And I told my wife at halftime, I said, well, I think there's no better definition of a guy being kept in the gutter than Danny Wolf here at halftime. He had 3 points. He's over 3 from the field, missed his 1 3-pointer. He was like 3 of 5 from the line, had a couple rebounds, assist, 3 turnovers, played 18 minutes, played almost the entire first half. Then he got his, as you mentioned, his work done in the second half. He was 5 for 15, 1 for 4 from 3, 7 for 11 from the line, finished with 18 points, 13 rebounds, 7 of them offensive. And I guess most of those were done he had only 4 rebounds at halftime. So he had 9 rebounds in the second half and 6 offensive rebounds in the second half. 4 assists, 3 turnovers, steal and a block. I guess I would say they didn't keep him entirely gutter, but pretty close. I mean, I think
they did what
wouldn't have mattered,
saying.
I guess, in the first half. We just kind of finished the game.
Right. At that point, they absolutely did by any measure.
Right.
But I would say they still, on the totality of it, they accomplished the objective, because we've said the key with guys like this is you're probably not going to completely eliminate them. That's hard to do when you're talking about, the key guy on another team, right?
Yeah.
So the key is, what's doable is make them inefficient, limit how efficient they are. And then if they get their counting numbers, but they gotta have a lot of the ball to do it, that's a win. And that's absolutely 5 for 15 from the floor, 4 assists, 3 turnovers. That's a win for Michigan State.
Yep.
Without question.
Absolutely.
So I'm reasonably happy with it. Second half, like with everything else about that second half, it got a little loose for any Michigan State person's liking, and Wolf was able to get some things done on occasion. But man, for over 40 minutes, you got to be really happy with the way you handled that.
So that brings us to Who Cleans the Glass Best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Again, make sure you check out our support page at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. There you can get estimates from Kurt and Greg for the gutter guards, or for Brothers Just Gutters, and also for the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids and Troy and his team. They can take care of your window washing. It is spring. It's time to get all this stuff taken care of now. So make sure that they get out there. They can power wash your house and get rid of all the grime that's built up over the winter. You can get 15% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate for the Squeegee Squad. So check out the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They are great partners for our show. They've done great work on my house, just like the Brothers Just Gutters. We don't only have really awesome sponsors because we just make sure we test everything before we do it, so we don't send you guys down the wrong path. So check out the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They do a great job. This was a runaway, and I guess I got one back today. Thanks for Cooper getting that rebound with like 30 seconds left. I beat you 13 to 12, I think, in the rebounding race.
Yeah.
It was narrow because I had Cooper and Richardson, and you had Kohler and Akins, who, they had 12. They did a good job. So it's 16 to 10 now. This is a game where I think we expected a little bit more on the boards for Michigan State, but it was still okay. It was maybe just not as dominant as we need. And again, this is one of those things where if you look at the first half, it was complete annihilation. So then maybe you don't worry so much about it. It's hard to maintain that for two halves sometimes.
I think that, in my opinion, and there's some other contenders for this, you could point to the second half in the Oregon game as a contender, maybe one or two others. But to me, the first half of today's game was the best half of basketball they've played this year when you add everything up. And yeah, as you say, it's really hard to maintain that edge for a full 40 minutes. Very difficult to do.
Well, and Michigan State, 9 of the last 10 games, I think they had been trailing at halftime. So they didn't really know what to do with themselves ahead at halftime.
Up 22. Yeah, exactly. It was an unfamiliar feeling.
It's almost like playing Samford. You're kind of not quite sure what's going on here.
Yeah, but I think with the rebounding stuff, it was, they were good when they needed to be. They still won that battle.
Yeah, still plus 9, so it's not bad.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as dominant as, let's put it this way. At halftime, things looked much different than they ended up. You mentioned Wolf just gobbling them up in the second half. That made it look a lot closer than it actually was when this game was truly in the balance.
Yeah, I don't know what the rebounding totals were at halftime. I'd have to look it up, but it's not important. The only difference I'd say as far as this half versus the half against Oregon, which was really good that second half, is that felt like more of an individual performance with Jace Richardson, who just kind of escaped. It was like a highlight show for him. And this was definitely the entire team, just team defense, and which they did, of course, against Oregon. But from an offensive standpoint, it all came from just one spot, and that against Oregon, it felt like with Jace.
That's one of the reasons I would give today's first half the edge.
And it was Michigan, so it just felt better.
Right. It was Michigan. It's all senior day. It's everything that comes along with all of that. But it was really impressive basketball.
All right, so that brings us to the 5.
It was good. Game. By the way, it was good enough to get Seth Davis to knuckle under and admit that his final answer is that Michigan State has the highest ceiling of any Big Ten team.
Wow.
He finally did it.
Until he sees Illinois play one more time. Then he's going to change his mind again, I'm sure. Yeah.
So
watch that.
Illinois in a meaningful Big Ten tournament game.
So 5 keys to the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. The greatest Spartan apparel. I think I did try to check, and I wasn't able to, whether they have Big Ten championship t-shirts and stuff available yet. I know they do for hockey. I'm sure they
as of yesterday, I think they were still working on the design. I saw them talking about how they don't actually have the license to be able to use the Big Ten name, so it's got to be something that just says champions.
So weird, you're much more in that sort of realm than I am as far as from the legal aspect of just how that all works out. But I know they have rights with Michigan State, but you're right. As soon as they use Big Ten or some other,
absolutely,
sort of thing,
that's right.
They probably have to get permission from Michigan State. That gets permission from the Big Ten. Is probably how it works. Is my guess.
Possibly, but either way, it would be the conference, of course, has the intellectual property right for that. So I can understand why that would have some implications for their design. But it sounds like they're going to get one up soon.
So again, that brings us to just check out their stuff. You can go to the support page, or you can just link to it directly at nudgeprinting.com. The great thing is you get 20% off if you type in Final Four as one word at checkout, and it's great stuff. I'm wearing it right now. Wear my gruff, sort of like vintage Sparty, basketball Sparty, and they've got all kinds of different designs there, which are really cool and super comfortable. It's almost like too warm today because it's actually surprisingly warm. It's spring is in the air now. I guess we're hitting March. That's what you expect. So, first key to the game was the winning transition. Michigan State had a 14-9 edge in fast break points. I don't know. I don't have it broken down by half, but I feel like most of those were in the first half when they just were kind of just destroying Michigan. So overall, a win there for Michigan State. Not as maybe massively decisive as you'd hope, but they didn't give a whole lot.
Well, yeah, and what's weird about it is that Michigan actually had a 4-point edge in the second half. So this is the first time in like a month that you didn't feel like, well, Michigan State just wore these guys out. But I think when the game was there to be won or lost, Michigan State dominated in that respect.
Yeah. I mean, it got down to 11 and they just went like an 8-0 run or something, and then the game's over.
Yeah, when Jace Richardson hit that 3 to take it back to 14, that was it.
Right. So the second key to the game is zone offense. I can't say I was paying that much attention. I know Michigan hit zone a couple times. One of them, I remember they went zone and they had a quick pass. They had 2 interior passes. I think Carr passed someone and then they got fouled. I mean, it was just Zapala or something, or Cooper. Anyway, it was not really an issue. It was not something that I thought Michigan State struggled with much today.
Well, Michigan didn't play very much of it.
No, I was going to say I don't remember
shocked.
much. I know they did a couple times, but
yeah,
not a lot.
There was a little bit of it. But I thought we'd see more than 50% zone defense, because not just with Michigan State having inconsistency in terms of how they attack it, but also I really felt coming into this game, hey, Michigan, they don't want to slow it down on offense completely, but they've got to shrink possessions in this game to some extent to hang in there, because I just felt if it was a game played at the pace they normally play, they'd be dragging by the last 8 minutes. And a good way to save yourself some energy is throw some zone out there. So I was shocked by that, quite frankly. And, I think there are some good basketball reasons for not doing it. One being that I'm sure Dusty May is a bit gun shy about exposing his team on the glass defensively, even more than they already are, which inherently playing a zone is going to do. So that may have been part of what was entering his thought process. The other thing is, quite honestly, their zone defense, I say this all the time, most zones that you see are the definition of half-assed, because I'm not a believer in it defensively, but man, if you're gonna do it well, you pretty much have to commit to it the way somebody like Jim Boeheim did, in my opinion. Sure. I don't think you could say, well, we're going to play zone a third of our possessions and it's going to be cool. It doesn't work that way. And Michigan zone defense, when I've seen them play it, it has not been particularly effective. Again, going into this game, I still thought we'd see it because it gave them maybe a path to surviving this one from an energy perspective. And let's be frank about it, Michigan State has at times struggled with half-assed zones. So I thought we'd see more. I was very surprised we didn't. Ended up being a total non-factor.
Yes, and the next key to the game was the scoring chance deficit. This is one that was very apparent in the first half. I mean, Michigan State was up 22, and because they had like 8 advantage or 8 or 9 advantage on turnovers, they had more offensive rebounds than Michigan. I mean, which proves your point. I mean, it's a math thing too, obviously, but for Michigan, it was pretty apparent. And also, then Michigan couldn't even hit when they were getting real chances. So
it's a math thing, but it's also the other way to think about it is, if you're operating from a significant deficit in terms of scoring chances, then it puts a huge amount of pressure on you from an efficiency standpoint. Like, you've just got to not miss shots.
Right.
You have to shoot, 50% plus for sure. And you better defend some. You better be forcing that opponent to miss more than they usually do. If you're going to survive consistent scoring deficits the way they've been dealing with lately. Now, the final number ended up only a -3, which is the closest they've been in any of their losses this year. So I guess credit. But like you said, in the first half, when the game was won, it was a massacre. It was a wipeout. The second half was an exhibition game. I mean,
Yes.
really.
Right. It did feel kind of like, yeah.
Right,
I mean,
up until Tre Holloman decided to turn it up to 11.
I mean, if you look at there's some numbers you look at. You could say, well, from points off turnovers, Michigan State had an 18-11 edge.
Yep.
Second chance points, they had a 12-10 edge and second chance points. From an offensive rebounding standpoint, Michigan State out rebounded from an
By
offensive
3.
rebounding rate of 44%, Michigan 27%.
Yeah.
So it was, in that sense, it was not really that close, which is
and
reflected in the game score.
To Michigan's credit, they are not a bad offensive rebounding team.
Right.
They're pretty good there. So that's not a total shocker. And actually, you look at it and say, if you hold that team to sub 30% on its offensive glass, that's doing a decent job. I think the surprise was Michigan State didn't have more offensive rebounds. But then, as you say, the percentage MSU put up was not bad, on its offensive boards. They made a lot of shots. So the big disappointment was how sloppy Michigan State got in the second half, and it turned what was a wipeout in turnovers to an even game. And there's just no excuse for playing this Michigan team even in turnovers. That's a negative. That'll be another teaching point, be something Izzo can use with this team.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of harkens back to the Iowa game. There's nothing more Izzo than, if you remember, that there were 10 seconds left in the Iowa game. Michigan State's up 6 points with the ball, and Izzo's like screaming at his players, like they mess up, like the game's over. But he's like, just the teaching moment. So that's the intensity you expect, especially in March, from him. So, all right. So the fourth key of the game was Wolf. That's Danny Wolf, obviously. He was, as you mentioned, somewhat hollow stats. I mean, he was definitely effective in the second half and getting some stuff done, but he was not dictating the flow of the game much.
No.
He was imposing his will on and doing about everything he could by himself, but there's no one else he was able to, or who was able to, or was willing to help him.
Yeah, and once again, Michigan State used a variety of players. I saw Cohen Carr guarding him a lot.
Yep.
In this one. But it was a variety of guys. Coop had his turns. Kohler obviously had his turns. I was happy with the way Michigan State guarded him when it mattered.
Yeah.
When it didn't matter, he was able to get some things done.
All right. And so the fifth and final key to the game is senior day. Well, we kind of talked about that quite a bit, sort of how that ended. And I want to say the last time I saw someone, and I think it was Tre Holloman. I think Ohio State this is a couple years ago.
Yes.
And he was going crazy. I think he didn't realize what was, he didn't understand the tradition. I get that. I mean, I get it. He probably thought what's going on as far as they're just like rubbing their face. I'm kind of shocked in some respects that either coaches don't know or someone doesn't tell them ahead of time or something like that, because it sure seems like it'd be something useful for them to know. But anyway,
that's an interesting point, because there was a segment, and you wouldn't have seen this, but it was on the broadcast. With a little over 2 minutes to go, there was a stoppage in play. And one of the officials, and I'm trying to blank on his name, the bald official that's not DJ Carstensen, the other guy.
The other guy.
Kind of looks like Seth.
The one's not
Greenberg
quite
a
as
little
tall.
bit.
Yeah. Right.
He was in conversation with Dusty May on the sideline. Now, I can't say for certain that that's what he was talking about, but there wasn't a whole hell of a lot else to be talking to Dusty May about at that point.
Right.
And that's again one of the reasons why I find this "they didn't know" excuse hollow. I don't believe it. Sorry. My assumption, we'll never know, because nobody will cop to what that conversation was about.
No.
Between the official and Dusty May. But that was my assumption when I was witnessing it live, is that he was preparing him. The only other time there's been anything like this in 31 years was the one you pointed to, was Tre Holloman, and and that was weird too. I mean, seriously, like these guys supposedly know so much, they watch so much basketball. Like I said, they made a documentary about this thing.
Right. They might have made it
It's
before then.
understood.
May not have known.
It's
I
understood.
I would say
So,
that with Holtman though, like it was pretty quick. Like it was explained to him, and then he was fine, like
right,
right away. So
exactly,
that was the difference.
exactly. Whereas it felt to me like this was, again, I noted the conversation, a couple of them, in the last few moments that Dusty may have with Tom Izzo. And my assumption from watching Izzo's reaction was, all right, he didn't understand. He gets it now. He's trying to smooth this out. And then I watch his post-game press conference like, no, this guy's just an asshole. He's not getting it. You want to stand up for your players, just say, look, my guys didn't understand. I didn't do a good job explaining to them what was going on. It was unfortunate. We didn't mean to screw with their tradition. Get them next time. That's how you handle it.
Right.
Instead, this whole routine about, well, is it legal to stand a half court? Shove it up your ass, Dusty. Stick your veneers up there too. Yeah, he's got himself on the list, like I said. And here's the thing. Tom Izzo's not going anywhere. He's not done yet.
No.
And we're all pretty certain of that. And if you didn't know before today, you damn well ought to know now. You are in the middle of something. And you better figure something out if you're going to compete in this thing. Because that's 2 for 2 that your team has been punked. Absolutely punked. From the opening tip today. I haven't actually seen, for as intense as this game always is, I haven't seen a performance like that first half since the 2013 season when Trey Burke and Glenn Robinson Jr. and that whole team, Glenn Robinson third, I mean, when that whole team came into Breslin and just had their soul stolen from them. That was you tell me, it seemed watching it that the crowd was pretty electric.
Yeah, that was the best crowd.
Of the year?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right from the tip. And it always, of course, helps when the team responds and plays that way.
Yep.
But everyone was into, and this is something that's people are going to really love Fears about, is that he feeds off that. He plays, of course, Trey plays it up too, and they play for the crowd. Carr now is on some level, and of course Kohler. They got a lot of fiery guys in their team. I mean, it's not always that way, but certainly this year they have a lot of them.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I mentioned or alluded to this on Twitter. Tre Holloman is, when I watched what he did and then what he said afterward, he's working to get himself in that pantheon. And I don't mean that he's not a Mateen Cleaves, Draymond Green player level wise, but he's obviously a very good player. But when you couple that with what he's been doing, you go back to the Iowa game, granted, a fortunate shot, yes, but don't take away the fact that he actually hit it to beat Maryland. I go back to last year. It's been trotted out a lot on social media in the last few weeks. Him stepping up to Zach Edey. He has no fear, none. And it's been a while since they've had anybody like that. And then you add in Fears, who's exactly the same way.
More so,
and yeah, maybe. And man, is that good news for this program, because it's been a while. There have been some very good teams. Obviously, the 3 straight Big Ten champions from 18 through 20. Very, very good basketball in those 3 years. But those teams did not have anybody like that. They didn't have anybody with that mentality. Even Tum, I love Tum, but Tum was not. There's a little bit of badass you got to have to really be that. Tum was such a positive guy. It was all positivity. These guys will go out and fight you.
Yeah.
And man, it's been, I saw a photo that made the rounds after the game where the hockey team and the basketball team were both at center court, and were coaches and former players. Antonio Smith is in that photo today. Boy, what a great day for him to be there, because those two guys we were just talking about brought his kind of mentality to the game.
Yeah.
And it's been a while. It's been a while since they've had a guy who approaches it that way. And boy, is it great to see when you watch that happen. Just hats off to them. The other thing I wanted to mention about that really quickly, you talk about how it seems to be growing, more and more guys kind of getting into that mentality. And I'm glad he didn't get teed up for it. I saw one, I think it was Lorenzo Guess actually got him corralled. But after Tre shoved him, you know who the first guy off the bench was sprinting to get out there? Xavier Booker. And I thought, that's a step forward. It's a small thing. Not a lot of people will notice that. I did. That tells me something about where this team is going collectively. Because here's the deal. As we get into March, deeper into March, I should say, we're already there. There's a reasonably good chance there's some teams out there, some high-level teams that play with an edge. Houston, Kelvin Sampson's program, absolutely plays with an edge. I think this Duke team, quite honestly, plays with a little bit of an edge. Auburn definitely plays with an edge. Alabama plays with an edge. And we don't know yet if and when Michigan State will see any of those teams. But if you have championship, Final Four type aspirations, you're probably going to run into one of those teams at some point, right?
Yep.
So it matters that you've got guys that are willing to step to that. I love the fact that Tre Holloman and Jeremy Fears aren't going to take shit from anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere. It is an intangible thing that I absolutely am convinced matters if you want to be a champion. You better have that in some way, shape, or form. This Michigan State team has it, bottom line.
So the last thing to talk about, of course, Michigan State finishes the Big Ten season 17-3. I don't have their overall record. Were they 20-something and 5?
26-5.
26-5.
It's the most, I believe, tied for the most regular season wins they've ever had overall. It is the first time Michigan State's ever won 17 Big Ten games in a season.
Right. Now they've only been playing 20 Big Ten games for just a little while, and not since they've had dominant teams. So the 17-3, if just looking back, the last 2 years, Purdue won both the Big Ten both times by 3 games as well. And they were perceived as a super team both years. You don't get that feeling from people again with Michigan State. I guess you could argue the Big Ten's not quite as good. I don't know. I guess you make that argument. Not sure.
Yeah,
but anyway,
I'll respond to that.
Yeah. But I guess the point is it's been very impressive. This is I think there's every reason to believe this team can do a whole lot. There's every reason to think they can get through the Big Ten tournament and win 3 games in 3 days. I mean, if there's any team that has sort of the depth to pull that sort of thing off, it'd certainly be Michigan State over other teams. If looking at the Big Ten brackets, we can talk about that a little bit, but it certainly looks like they had the opportunity to play UCLA potentially in the second round, maybe Indiana in the first round. I mean, may get a little bit of revenge tour. Probably not going to be able to get USC unless they make it all the way through the bottom of the bracket, which I don't know. I guess they could. But if that's so, I don't know. I mean, this is a team that there's every reason to be afraid of them if you're another team, and they have the edge. They have the ability to play defense. They got all the make. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's real. This is a really good team and they can hurt you from many different ways. I mean, Tre Holloman today with a career high 20 points. You didn't really see that coming. So I don't know. I mean, it's been obviously a fun season. It was sad to be the last game at Breslin Center, but I'm excited to see them, go forward, and very excited, certainly in the postseason here.
Well, I think this would be a near unanimous reaction for the Michigan State fan base. This has been one of the most enjoyable seasons in Tom Izzo's entire tenure. One, because they won the Big Ten. 2, because they lapped the field. But most importantly, because they've done it the way that this fan base embraces. And they embrace it because that's the way Tom Izzo wants to do it. It's what he's talked about, what he's built for 30 years. That, you play together. You play, a lot of people are involved. You play with toughness, mental and physical. I mean, all these things we've been talking about today, this team embodies that. And so I would think that's a near unanimous take, is that this has been one of the most enjoyable regular seasons we've ever been witness to.
Yeah,
at
and it
Michigan
helps that they
State.
were not. They've been struggling the last couple of years by Michigan State standards to sort of come back to. I think that helps too.
Absolutely. And that's part of why it's so enjoyable, is that you
Yeah,
feel as if they've reestablished what the program is. Okay, this has been away for a minute, and now it's back. Michigan State basketball, the way God intended it to be, is back. And that makes it enjoyable. I also think too, part of it is Michigan State's had many, many great seasons, right? But when you have one happen where expectations were a little bit muted, it's extra special, right?
of course. Yeah,
And they don't come along that often. There's this cliche out there which is completely unsupported by the facts, that Tom Izzo's at his best when nobody expects anything out of them, and when they have expectations they falter. That's absolutely false. If I go through and look at the 10 other Big Ten champions besides this one, most of them had very high expectations going
yeah.
into those
hmm
seasons. You know,
Yeah, he's not running bums onto the floor, right? I mean,
the only one that I can think of, well, we'll say two, one and a half. The 11-12 team, Draymond Green's senior year, there were some muted expectations for that team because Draymond had never been the lead guy. They'd lost, Lucas and Summers, who had been instrumental in those years of
Right.
success, those back-to-back Final Fours. And, Keith Apley and Adrian Payne had played their freshman season, and neither had quite lived up to where I think expectations were. Not that that team was expected to be bad, but no one saw a Big Ten champion and a
Not
one seed
champions. Yeah,
coming.
right.
So that was a surprise. The other one, I guess you could argue, would be the 18-19 team, because you lost Miles and you lost some other guys, and then on top of that, you had first Josh Langford, and then into Big Ten play, you had Nick Ward go down with injury.
Right.
So that team was also maybe a little bit of a surprise. And that's the one year I can think of that I would put in the same conversation with this one, in terms of, just being a team that you just really embraced and loved to watch, and the way they played for each other and all of that, and the way they overcame those obstacles of the injuries. But it wasn't a team that's quite like this one in terms of some of those basics. The top, like they didn't have a Tre Holloman or a Jeremy Fears personality. Cassius is an all-time great. We all love him, but he wasn't that. He was a
Right.
different kind of guy.
hmm
You know, Xavier Tillman was an absolute menace inside, but he wasn't a guy that, would body check people. That wasn't his game. Um, I love that team and all those guys, but this team, the style is, I think, what most Michigan State fans really, really want to see, is a team that just exudes toughness,
Yeah, it
physically
feels
and
like the
mentally.
2000 team in some ways. Just that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. As much as you can be like that under the current rules, they are.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
and I think that it also should not get lost that this team won the Big Ten by 3 games.
hmm
You can argue with some merit that the top of the Big Ten is not the best it's ever been, outside of Michigan State, which I think you have to give this team that kind of credit now. As you say, Purdue super team the last 2 years. Well, Michigan State just equaled what they did in the regular season, and I think won the same amount of games, right? Weren't
Correct.
weren't
Yep.
both of those Purdue teams 17-win teams? Yeah.
One of them was for
So
sure. Yeah.
yeah, so that's all there. But the thing that I think matters here is, you could say that, well, we've kind of figured out there's probably not a second top 10 team in the league outside of Michigan State. That's fair. I think Maryland on their best day is actually, we'll see what their lack of depth ends up doing, but that's the one team that I think on their best day is probably that good.
hmm
But the depth of quality basketball teams in this conference is very legitimate.
Yeah.
Very legitimate. And so to go through this league due to that, where there just aren't soft touches. I mean, there's one team that I look back at now that the regular season is done and can say, yeah, that's just a bad basketball team. And that was Washington.
Yes, they're bad.
I think even Penn State, as they proved yesterday, they go into Madison, 0 to play for. They're out of the Big Ten tournament. Wisconsin's got everything on the table, relatively speaking. They couldn't win a Big Ten championship, but they were competing for a two bye, double bye in
And
the
the
Big Ten
seed line,
tournament.
obviously. Yeah.
NCAA tournament seeding, still theoretically in the mix for a 2, all that. And Penn State got way down and then just ripped them from there. That Penn State team won 6 games, I think, in the league. They should have won more than that.
Well, they pushed Michigan State. I mean, that was a tough game.
That was a good team. That was a good basketball team that I don't quite know what happened there, but they got a little bit out of sorts and it got away from them. But that's a quality basketball team. If they were in the Big Ten tournament and you were a top 4 or 5 seed kind of team, you'd be worried about Penn State getting through.
Yeah.
And that's your 17th place team. So to go through this league and go 17-3, man, that is deserving of a lot of respect.
And I mean, a lot is made of it too. Michigan State was 9-3 returning from the or 9-2 coming back from the West Coast.
Yep.
They get a win, they get a loss, and then they run out 7 straight quad 1 wins. 4 of those being on the road, I think. Was it 4 on the road or 3? Maybe just 3 on the road. But
Illinois, Michigan,
no, 4.
Maryland,
and Iowa.
And
Iowa's a quad 1 win. Yeah. So I mean, they obviously earned the mark, but to play high pressure, tough games all the way through and not ever get an easy one in between. Now you could say, well, they got the easy ones early, which is true, but still, to do what they did to finish up the season, I mean, it's obviously very impressive. And they've done everything they could. They've earned everything they've gotten, and so again,
100%.
it'd be very exciting seeing them. And also,
12 quad 1 wins now, second most in the country behind Auburn.
Yeah, so they're probably pretty good. Turns out.
Yeah, I think they've proven it. And as you say, just all the naysayers. I mean, you're not ever going to forget it. I remember various tweets from various directions. Printing the schedule. This is what Michigan State's got left after they were 10-3.
Mm-hmm.
Ran the table.
Yeah.
Ran the table.
Most of them decisive. I mean,
I think there's a good argument that you can credit Michigan State. It got a lot of play in the NFL this year, right? The Lions effect.
Yeah.
The teams, after they played and lost to the Lions, seemed to go into a tailspin. It's not quite as dramatic, but I do think there's been a Michigan State effect. I think there's one with Michigan. I think you can argue there's been one with Wisconsin, as evidenced by what they did against Penn State after Michigan State took them out. I think Michigan State helped send Purdue on their way to a close where they lost, I think it was 5 of their final 7.
Mm-hmm. They're at least somewhere in the mix of there. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. There's something to it.
Yeah.
This Michigan State team takes its toll on you when you play them.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for everyone to join us live. Another also good for our family because Iowa won and they beat Nebraska, which, although that's not great basketball watching, at least makes it happy for my wife.
So Iowa is in the Big Ten tournament now, right? And
they are the 15 seed. Yes.
And Nebraska was eliminated from
it? Yep. That was an elimination game between those 2 teams. And so Iowa went into Lincoln and just tore apart I think it went by like 15 points.
15. But worse for Nebraska. What a bad day for Nebraska.
Yeah,
Not only are you off the right side of the bubble onto the wrong side, but you don't have a chance to get back on the right side.
Yeah. They're just totally out. Yeah.
Of all the scenarios for who would just miss by finishing in 16th, I will admit this time last week, there's no way I saw Nebraska in that spot.
Well, I
didn't see them losing today.
Well, as a family, this game was circled, and my wife was watching the score the whole time during the Michigan game on her phone, trying to follow it because we knew that, and that's why I was telling you before, Michigan State, had they lost to Iowa, it really would have helped Iowa a whole lot. They still needed to beat Nebraska
They
either
had to
way.
eliminate Nebraska.
For the most part, only it just required some weird. It's like almost like the last spot in the NFL to make a wild card. It was like all these teams that get ties and weird win. Like USC would have to go into UCLA and win, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so it all worked out for Iowa. So it's good for our family and also for my dad. Drake wins the Missouri Valley. They win Arch Madness, so they'll be back in the
That's a good team.
NCAA tournament. They are a good team, and maybe if you want to watch Drake basketball, you might end up seeing Iowa's coach next year. I know you don't believe that's the case, but I think there's a reasonable chance.
I'm not going to be
happen.
shocked, but it just I got to see something different from Fran. But speaking of Drake, real quick, so that came on CBS after the MSU game was over,
right?
And I've seen bits and pieces of Drake this year. I hadn't seen that extended a run from them.
You've seen
that's a really well coached team. Not a lot of fun to play against because of how long they make you defend.
They drive you insane. Mark's like, I don't know that I want them to as the Iowa head coach because I don't know that I could watch the team play like that because they play. If everything you know about Iowa, it's exactly the opposite. It's basically
right.
Super slow, all defense oriented. I mean, it's like a complete opposite.
But you know
180.
But they win. It strikes me this way. I think that with Iowa, you have to face reality if you're that program. You say, okay, we don't really compete at the upper end of the conference in terms of financial support for the program. And maybe a new coach will get somebody excited and that changes a little bit. But I think over the long haul, you can't expect that Iowa is going to spend the way some other teams at the top of the conference do. So you could use a guy who's really, really good at talent identification, really good at developing guys, and McCollum's obviously proven he can do that. But the other thing I think would be interesting about him, we've talked a little bit about the fact that the Big Ten this year, it strikes me, has played in general faster than we've seen in a long, long time.
Exactly.
And it's not always a bad idea to bring in a guy who zigs when everybody else is zagging.
Exactly.
I think about the success that a guy like Bo Ryan had when he can, and Dick Bennett before him really kind of got that program going, and then Bo Ryan took it to another level. That was kind of the same deal. You know, Bo Ryan's teams would drive you crazy because they would force you to defend consistently 25, 26 seconds every possession. And it's hard to maintain for a bunch of kids to maintain their focus for that long. And so that might be an equation. That's the thing. I'm of two minds here. There's what I think Iowa should do, which is absolutely hire Ben McCollum. And what it kind of feels to me like will happen, which is I'm just not convinced Fran's done. But we'll see.
Well, all I can say is hopefully we see Michigan fall down to a 6 seed line and that they play Drake in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
That'd be fantastic.
That would be so much fun. And what would be even better is if they play in the same location as Michigan State, if they're like the same. So, I mean, there couldn't be anything better if that were to actually happen, if Drake gets put to Cleveland with Michigan or something like that. I mean, that would be a dream scenario. So we'll talk about a little bit about Big Ten tournament before the game. What we're going to have to try and figure out. I'm going to be at the tournament, maybe section 105, and to say hi. Just so you're aware, the first day, maybe 2 days, I will be wearing black and gold, just so you're aware of. And and maybe if I was you know, there's a reason I've been married for 26 years, right? Or 27 coming up here. Yeah. So yeah. Well, there's always, life's all about compromises. And you know, again, second favorite team, but if Iowa gets really hot, I might have to do wardrobe change on Friday. So I don't think that'll be the case, but if that is the case, then I've done it before, so we can do it again. But all right, so see everyone later. We'll try and figure out how to get some sort of recording done on Thursday when we had no Michigan State's opponent from the Indiana Oregon game. So that'll be the 8-9 game. So we'll see. So until then, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
Are we still live?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
So
I'll wait.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, folks.
I'm so excited you have that microphone. It's been
Yeah.
really good.
Hopefully,
Now
it
you
makes
just need
a
to get it.
difference.
Now you just need to work a little better and just keep it at the same distance from your mouth, which is the hardest thing, especially if you don't have a stationary mic.
Well, I've got it more or less stationary. Of course, now the real trick is keeping my head in the
Right,
same.
because especially when you get animated, it's hard
Yep.
to.
Oh yeah.
Right?
When I'm talking about Dusty May's post game press conference, yes.
Oh, great comment from Jim. Dirty Dusty is a comment from Jim, so I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was. You got to watch it. Unbelievable.
All right, so we are out now.